Greetings, YouTube Trijicon fans. In this video, I am going to show you how to correct the single most important defect in a Chinese imitation ACOG. Now, I own a couple of genuine Trijicon TA31s, and they are great scopes. The TA31 and probably all Trijicon ACOGs are great scopes, and you will not regret buying one because, as someone has said, quality is remembered long after price is forgotten. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's easy to cough up $1,000, especially if you're just looking for an optic to put on a cheap upper or a base model AR-15. So if you're watching this video, it's probably because you've wondered if you could get away with buying an inexpensive Chinese ACOG knockoff for around $100. In a nutshell, I will tell you that between February 24th and May 15th, 2018, I bought 5 imitation ACOGs from 4 different dealers, 3 of whom were in the US and 1 of whom was in Japan. I tested all of them for certain optical parameters, and it turned out that all of them, regardless of the price I paid, which was between $100 and $162, were identical except for the different reticles I ordered. They were all shipped in the same style yellow box with a blue gem on it, and they all tested identically. I'm pretty sure they were all made in the same factory in China, and you could probably get the same scope for around $70 from sellers directly in China, but that would probably require waiting a few weeks for shipment and delivery in the US. So I bought mine from US sellers off eBay. In my opinion, the single most important fact to know about these Chinese knockoffs: all 5 that I've tested have an identical incorrect focus. They are out of focus. A real ACOG is made so that as you look through it at a target at infinity distance, your eye should actually be focused at infinity. This photo shows the view through my genuine TA31 RCO ACOG. Notice the background to the left and right of the camera, or to the left and right of the scope, are in focus, as well as the image and reticle. In this case, the camera was focused at infinity. We see the same thing in this photo taken through my other genuine ACOG, a Trijicon TA31F. Contrast that with this photo taken through the first knockoff ACOG that I bought. The first photo is with the camera focused at infinity and shows the background to the left and right of the scope in focus, but the reticle and image in the scope are out of focus. Conversely, with my camera focused at about 18 inches, the image and reticle are in focus, but the background to the left and right of the scope is out of focus. This was the first replica that I bought. I didn't know if there would be any difference between paying $100 for a clone or $200 for a similar looking clone. The next scope that I bought was from a dealer in Japan for $106, which also included shipping. Except for the reticle, the box and scope were identical to the first one. In this photo, we see the same issue with the camera focused at infinity. The background is in focus, but the image in the scope is blurry. And similarly, with the camera focused at about 18 inches, the image in the scope is clear, but the background is blurry. All 5 of the scopes I bought and tested had this exact same focus error, which again, if you can focus your eyes up close to 18 inches, like if you were reading a book, you may not notice an issue. But ever since I had LASIK surgery several years ago, I can see at a distance clearly, and the image through my real ACOGs is clear, but I cannot clearly see things that are close up. I asked my wife and son, neither of whom need reading glasses, to look through the scope, and they reported that the reticle and image was in focus. So if you buy one of these cheap scopes and you have eyes that allow you to focus up close, you may not notice that the scope is out of focus compared to a real Trijicon ACOG. Still, this is not how a real ACOG is focused, and I consider this a major flaw. The both eyes open bend and aiming concept that Trijicon promotes assumes that your eyes are focused at infinity. Now, realizing that my wife and son could see through the scope clearly gave me an idea. I tried looking through the scope with my reading glasses on, and in that way, I could also see through the scope clearly. Now, there's no way I'm going to go shooting wearing reading glasses because everything at a distance would be blurry, but I thought perhaps I could mount the lens from a cheap pair of reading glasses in the eyepiece of the scope and have it fix the issue. So, that is what I tried. I went to my local dollar store and bought a pair of reading glasses for $1. Now, the formula for determining the strength of a lens you need to see at a given distance is pretty simple. It is this. The number of diopters, or D, is equal to the number 100 divided by the distance measured in centimeters. My camera says the Chinese ACOGs are focused at 18 inches, or that your eye needs to be focused at 18 inches to see clearly through the Chinese ACOG. So the number of diopters is equal to 100 divided by 18 inches, which in centimeters is 45.7 centimeters. So 100 divided by 45.7. If the distance scale and focusing mechanism on my camera lens were calibrated completely accurately, then the correct diopter of lens to correct the problem would be positive 2.2 diopters. This value would be true for anybody, whether or not they wear reading glasses. This would bring the focus of the Imitation ACOG to the same apparent distance as a real Trijicon ACOG. So, a pair of reading glasses with a diopter of 2.25 would be virtually perfect to correct the image in these Chinese scopes. But at my local dollar store, the closest values they had were plus 2.0 and plus 2.50. I tried both of them while looking through the replica scope, and for me, I felt like 2.25 diopters gave a slightly better image than 2.0. That could possibly indicate that the focusing scale on my camera is not exactly correct, but it's close enough. I bought a pair of plus 2.50 diopter reading glasses. Now, I will tell you that I did in fact use a cheap pair of reading glasses that cost me $1 at the local dollar store. I marked a circular shape on the lens. I cut out a circular piece of the lens with a Dremel rotary tool, and I glued it in the back of the fake ACOG, and it worked great to fix the out-of-focus problem. After I had done that, I had the thought that some glasses have scratch resistance coatings on them and some don't. I don't know if the cheap glasses I bought at the dollar store had a scratch-resistant coating on them or not, but the label didn't say anything about it, so I doubt it. So for the other fake ACOGs that I bought later, I decided to use some lenses with scratch-resistant coatings. I went online to find some. I found these Foster Grant reading glasses that normally come in a 3-pack for about $17. They advertise scratch-resistant coatings. I bought a package of those off eBay that only had 2 pairs of glasses in them for only $7 or $8. Most of these photos document me using lenses from those Foster Grant glasses. Okay, so here I'm going to show you the steps I took to make and install a corrective lens in the fake ACOG scopes. Step 1. Obtain a pair of inexpensive, off-the-rack reading glasses with a correction of 2 1/4 or 2 1/2 diopters. I made my first corrective lens from a pair of glasses obtained from the dollar store, and it worked fine. But I suggest you look for lenses that are scratch resistant. That will probably cost you a few dollars more. Step 2. Remove the lens from the glasses frame. I simply used the Dremel tool to make one cut in the frame, which allowed me to remove the lens. Step 3. Cover both sides of the lens with masking tape. The first step I took was to cover both sides of the lens with masking tape. The reason for doing this was to prevent the lens from getting scratched during the cutting process. Step 4. Select an area to cut. I recommend that you try to locate the lens axis of symmetry. If the eyeglass lens was circular, it would be the center of the lens. They usually cut lenses to fit a frame that is not circular. It will probably not be in the center of your lens. I used a micrometer to measure thicknesses of the lens at different areas, but you can really just eyeball it by laying the lens flat on a table with the front of the lens facing up, and the axis of symmetry will probably be the highest point on the lens. Mark its approximate location. I marked the location with intersecting lines. This will be the center of your corrective lens. It doesn't have to be exact, but identifying the proper center of the lens will result in the best focus and least amount of optical distortion. The next step was to trace a circular area on the lens to cut. A nickel will work. I happened to use a coin from Taiwan because I thought it was a better size. Just make sure it is large enough so that when you're done cutting and grinding, you'll end up with a lens about 0.94 inches in diameter. Step 5. Cut the lens to the approximate size and shape. I used a Dremel cutting disc to cut the plastic lens to the rough size needed. Step 6. Grind or file the lens to a diameter of approximately 0.94 inches. I used a Dremel grinding bit to smooth the lens to a circular shape about 0.94 inches in diameter. This is the step that takes the most time and will probably require frequent use of the micrometer or the scope to check the size and fit of the corrective lens. Step 7. Taper the front of the lens to a diameter of approximately 0.91 inches. For the most optimal fit of the lens into the back of the scope, it should be tapered slightly towards the front. This photo shows that I have ground the front of the lens, the convex side, to a smaller diameter than the rear of the lens, the concave side. This doesn't have to be perfect because the epoxy or glue you use to mount the lens can fill in the irregularities or voids. But if you form it to the dimensions I have given, you should have a pretty good fit. Step 8. Glue or epoxy the corrective lens into place. My thought was that it would be better to mount the lens in a way that it did not actually touch the glass lens in the rear of the scope. There is enough room in the eyepiece area to mount the corrective lens flush with the rear of the scope to allow the use of a lens cap without it touching the glass lens in the rear of the scope. I didn't want it touching the glass lens to prevent any marring that could occur to the lenses caused by vibration when the gun is actually fired. My first lens installation, I actually used a hot glue gun to mount the lens into place, and it worked pretty well, but it didn't look the most elegant. I also experimented with Gorilla Clear Grip, which also held the lens in place pretty well, but also didn't look the most elegant. In the end, I settled on JB Plastic Bonder for its ease of application, high strength, and smooth appearance. I can recommend JB Plastic Bonder as a very good choice for this task. So, before mounting the lens, I hot glued an old screw onto the masking tape on the rear of the lens so that I wouldn't have to handle the lens or the adhesive with my fingers. After removing the masking tape from the front of the lens and lifting the edges of the tape on the rear of the lens, I applied the adhesive around the edges of the lens. By holding the screw, I inserted the lens into the eyepiece area of the scope, rotating it so that the adhesive was spread smoothly around the lens and walls of the scope. So here's a photo of the finished corrective lens mounted in the scope. These next 3 photos show images taken through 3 imitation ACOGs, each with a different style reticle, after I installed a corrective lens of 2.5 diopters in each of them. In each case, the camera is focused at infinity, and the images and reticles are in focus, and the backgrounds to the left and right of the scopes are also in focus. So, this was a successful operation. Okay, so to summarize what I've done, I've taken a pair of reading glasses identical to those. They are 2.5 diopters reading glasses, and I've covered one of the lenses in masking tape, and using Dremel bits, Dremel rotary tool bits, mainly this one and this one. You could use something similar. I've cut out one of those lenses into a circular shape that's the front of the lens, the convex side, I've made slightly smaller than the rear of the lens, so you can actually see there's a taper there. The front of the lens is about 0.91 to 0.92 inches in diameter, and the rear of the lens, the convex side, is about 0.94 inches. And the reason for that is because on the scope, the inside of the scope right behind the eyepiece lens is actually tapered. So with this being slightly tapered, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it fits in pretty well. In fact, the rear of the lens basically is flush against the rear of the eyepiece, which is what I wanted to do, because I didn't want the lens to actually touch the lens that's in the scope already. I wanted there to be a little space. That was just kind of the way that I felt about it. So I'm going to epoxy that lens into place now, or that's the next step. Okay, so I've applied a bead of the JB Weld plastic bonder around the edge of this lens. I've removed the masking tape from the front of the lens, and I've actually pulled up the masking tape around the edges of the back of the lens. And obviously I've hot glued the screw onto it. So I'm going to insert the lens into the eyepiece section, and I'm going to kind of spin it around a bit to spread the epoxy a little more evenly. Okay, so I've now placed that lens in the eyepiece. I've epoxied it in, and I'm going to I've got 2 coins here. So with these coins right here lifting up this end of the scope, it'll stand pretty vertical. And I'll just let it sit like that until it cures. In my next video, I show the tests I actually performed on the Imitation ACOGs. You're welcome to leave comments in the comment section, although I may not respond quickly. Thank you for watching this video.